Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Federal Judge Dolly Gee has ordered the Trump administration to transfer all children out of the Shiloh Residential Treatment Center in Manville, Texas, due to allegations of widespread abuse in the immigrant detention center. Judge Gee condemned the detention center for injecting children with psychotropic drugs without their parents' consent, imprisoning some children in overly restrictive confinement, and prohibiting the children from making private phone calls. She also explicitly ordered the detention center must obtain permission from a legal guardian before giving any psychotropic drugs to detained children. President Trump praised Italy's far-right anti-immigrant policies Monday during a news conference with the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte.
I agree very much what you're doing with respect to migration and illegal immigration and even illegal immigration. Italy's taken a very firm stance on the border, a stance that few countries have taken, and frankly, you're doing the right thing, in my opinion.
Italy has recently begun blocking refugee boats from docking at its ports, stranding asylum seekers at sea in the Mediterranean. The Trump administration's considering bypassing Congress and giving a $100 billion tax cut to the richest Americans. Experts say 97% of the benefits would go to the richest 10% of Americans, and that nearly two-thirds of the benefits would go to the ultra-rich, the top 0.1% of Americans. The proposal comes after President Trump pushed through a highly unpopular $1.5 trillion tax cut last year, which overwhelmingly benefited big corporations, multimillionaires, and private equity managers. After threatening Iran last week, President Trump said Monday he'd meet with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani whenever he wants without precondition. Only hours later, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced a slew of preconditions for a possible meeting, including Iran being willing to enter into a new nuclear deal. A recently resigned top official with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has been accused of sexual harassment, including hiring women as possible sexual partners for male FEMA employees. Corey Coleman led FEMA's personnel department from 2011 till his resignation a few weeks ago amidst an internal sexual harassment investigation. FEMA Administrator William Brock Long says the sexual harassment was a systemic, years-long problem. Air Force Reserve Officer Robert Wilkie has been sworn in as the new Secretary of Veterans Affairs. While serving in the Pentagon last year, Wilkie led efforts to defend Trump's ban on transgender people serving in the military. He was once a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, which defends public displays of the Confederate flag. In the 90s, he also opposed proposals to ensure equal pay for women. Wilkie replaces Dr. David Shulkin, who claims he was fired by Trump for opposing the privatization of Veterans Affairs. 9 states in the District of Columbia have sued the Trump administration, aiming to block downloadable blueprints to make semi-automatic assault weapons from 3D printers from going online Wednesday. The suit comes after the State Department granted the Texas-based gun rights group Defense Distributed permission to post the blueprints for the homemade printable semi-automatic weapons. 21 state attorneys general have also sent a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, slamming the State Department's decision, saying it's, quote, deeply dangerous and could have an unprecedented impact on public safety. In California, tens of thousands of residents have been forced to evacuate as deadly wildfires continue to rage through the state. The worst wildfire, the Carr Fire, has engulfed more than 100,000 acres in and around Redding. 8 people have died in the fire so far. Increasingly strong wildfires have been linked to climate change. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says the Justice Department is creating a new so-called Religious Liberty Task Force. Sessions said the task force aims to protect religious groups from persecution. But human rights groups say the task force is a thinly veiled effort to sanction discrimination against LGBTQ people. The task force will be led by the conservative lawyer Jesse Panuccio, who fought to uphold California's ban on marriage equality, known as Prop 8. Former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort's trial begins today. He's facing charges of tax fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, witness tampering, and failing to register as a foreign agent. The charges center on allegations he hid tens of millions of dollars earned in Ukraine in overseas bank accounts and failed to pay taxes on the money. Manafort's is the first trial resulting from special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Trump's ties to Russia. In Zimbabwe, millions of voters went to the polls Monday for the first presidential election since the army ousted longtime leader Robert Mugabe from power last year. The election pits opposition leader Nelson Chamisa against Mugabe's former vice president and longtime political ally, Emmerson Mnangagwa. In Minneapolis, prosecutors have announced there will be no charges filed against the white police officers who fatally shot a 31-year-old African-American man who was running away from the police, shouting, "Please don't shoot me and leave me alone." Video footage of the June 23rd shooting shows Thurman Blevins, who was armed, running away from the police when the officers opened fire. On Monday, protesters and members of Blevins' family disrupted the news conference of Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman.
Use of force cannot be evaluated from the perspective of a civilian, nor can it be evaluated with more clear vision affected by 2020 hindsight. Under Graham versus Connor.
The police officers were not afraid.
The court further stated the fact that law enforcement officers
and this woman there and a dog there. You have justified police.
Law officers can account.
Us black people, every year, we're here looking for justice, and we're tired of watching these snuff movies by the Minneapolis Police Department. And I'm here to tell y'all that we're tired of it.
And former California Congressmember, former Oakland Mayor Ron Dellums has died at the age of 82. Dellums was a legendary figure in Washington for leading the congressional opposition to the Vietnam War and against apartheid in South Africa. Dellums was on President Richard Nixon's enemies list. He died Monday of cancer at his home in Washington, D.C. We'll spend much of the hour bringing you Ron Dellums in his own words. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.